Morning, I'm Thomas Farrugia, CEO and founder of BetaBugs Limited, and I'm going to be walking you through an overview and perspectives on current insect production and innovation in the UK. So we'll jump straight in. We do have a main focus on feed here, but I will touch on some aspects of food as well for the UK and further afield. So insect farming as an industry, we've seen increasing amounts of public and private sector funding coming into the sector, which is driving an increase in the number of insect farms. I'd say these insect farms have mainly been developing the technology to farm insects, and then there will be more farms to come online later on. As a result, it's anticipated to be worth 8 billion by 2030 as a sector, with a year-on-year growth of 25%. That's from a market report by Barclays. For feed, the industry outputs are anticipated to be worth 2.5 million tons per year by 2030. And that's from the IPIF, which is the International Producers of Insects as Food and Feed. And those numbers are under revision, so you might just want to check on the vision paper as it comes online. It's worth noting that there's two main species which are farmed for feed, and that's mealworms and black soldier fly. And for food, we mainly see mealworms and crickets. Touching on, this is a great map which is accessible from the LinkedIn page of Danish Insect Automation APS, and it just shows feed, food, and equipment provider companies in our sector. And you can see a significant clustering around Europe. There's a bit in Australia, a bit in South America, and I do think there's more, as goes the same for the continent of Africa, because this is basically based on a declaration approach. So the company is collecting these points and putting them on the map as they tell them about it and ask to be on the map. And we do see a fair amount in North America as well. And now, before we dive into the UK, zoomed in, we'll just jump into the sector specialization and differentiation. And really the key points here are that initially insect farming, as I mentioned, was more about technology development around closing the whole life cycle. Primarily, I'm talking about black soldier fly here. So you've got a fly which lays eggs, which you then hatch into larvae which grow on a co-product or waste stream, and then you process those to make the protein source, which then gets supplied to the feed manufacturers. And these companies have focused on doing that really well, increasing the efficiencies and the volumes, and as a result are deploying facilities which will produce thousands of tons per year of insect protein. And Yinsect would be there in the same space as a mealworm company. Innovafeed and Protex are in Europe, and Enviroflight and Dentera are in North America. It's worth noting the way this model works really is you build one facility, but then you keep rolling out more and more facilities, sometimes in partnership with producers of the co-product waste streams as well. In the UK, it's slightly different. We've got nearly a supply chain emerging, focused on specialization and decoupling of those bits. So what you see is ourselves coming in as a genetics producer and supplier, Cycle doing more of the farming technologies, and Better Origin doing a mix of farming and processing of insects. And that means you can build specialization and further value in the value chain. And that's coming together through a project funded by Innovate UK, which is called the Insectoid Revolution. It's led by Cycle, and ourselves and Better Origin are involved in it as well. And that's working with the wider agri-food supply chain to bring insect protein to the UK. It's funded to the tune of, as a project, it's around 9 million in size. So it's one of Innovate UK's largest projects. It's running over a 3-year time span. In terms of what's really exciting though is off-the-shelf equipment providers as well. So things like Builder Insect Technology Solutions, Insect Engineers, and Insect Systems, which provide equipment to existing companies, but also new market entrants. So what that means really is you can get your, increasingly we'll see, you can get your supply of, for example, in our case, genetics from from ourselves, but also off-the-shelf equipment from other providers to just get into the sector. And this really resonates with what happens in farming nowadays. You don't build your tractor, you buy it in. So this is what needs to happen to the sector for it to expand rapidly and for it to professionalize as well further. In terms of the UK insect industry, this is the same map zoomed in on the UK. We see, I'll just run through, but it's worth pointing out, it's not just, these are the companies working in insect protein, but Zero Waste Scotland has done great work on how insect protein can benefit Scotland and the UK, so that's worth having a look at in terms of their documentation on insect farming. And then we see UK retailers engaging in the development of insect protein as well, along with the feed manufacturers and the animal producers as well. So running through quickly, up in Edinburgh, there's ourselves working on black soldier fly breed development and distribution. In Cambridge and London, respectively, we have AgriGrub and Entocycle, who are focused on centralized black soldier fly production, so doing it all in the same location, a bit like those vertical integrator approach. And those facilities will be producing to the tune of, processing to the tune of 33,000 tons of food waste per year. And then what we see are Better Origin and Inspro, also to my knowledge in Cambridge, which are doing containerized systems, which are effectively decentralized black soldier fly production. So you can plonk a container down, supply it with a substrate, and produce protein, which you can then use in your on-site operations if you're, for example, a chicken farmer. We see Mana in London, Andrea will be talking later, which is black soldier fly technology provision for Africa. And then we also have Entech Nutrition down near Plymouth, which are mainly doing, in Exeter actually, doing mealworm production. To my knowledge, that's the main mealworm production company for animal feed in the UK. We also see for food, that's kind of covered by the camera, but Instar Farming doing cricket farming, that's in the Midlands. And then Nutribug and EatGrub and Horizon Edible Insects kind of cover different species, but to my understanding, Nutribug and EatGrub are primarily distributing products made out of insects. That's really interesting in the human food supply chain where you do this. It's a bit like your production of a raw ingredient, in this case Instar Farming, which then gets made into a finished product by another company. And increasingly we'll see more of that come online as insect protein becomes more mainstream for human food as well. So how insect protein links into the wider value chain? Quick run through, I've mentioned this already, but you've got your co-products or waste streams, which can be used as a substrate for black soldier fly and other insects. So you can produce that protein source, which then gets linked into the animal and aquafeed supply chain and made into the feed. And that can be used to grow animals and fish, and those make it to our plates via the retailers. And the retailers can then bring their supply chains online to supply co-products back into that supply chain. And it's really a nice virtuous cycle in that regard, but it's not just sustainable, but it's also improves resilience of your supply chains, because insect protein can be produced locally, and that means you're not as dependent on imports of soy meal and fish meal. So, carrying on, a bit of an overview of regulations and their developments really. So primarily regulation in the UK has been driven through the EU, which has been led by IPIF and its member organizations. So in 2017, insect protein was approved from 7 species, including black soldier fly and mealworm, was approved for aquafeed. There's developments around poultry and pigs as well underway. We see that live larvae can be fed of black soldier fly can be fed to chickens, and fats can be used for pig nutrition as well. Frass, which is basically insect manure, can be used for plants, and that's been approved by the EU as well. And the substrates element, at the moment we're limited to, let me get this right, pre-consumer vegetable food waste. And that's what you can mainly grow your insects on at the moment, and that's if you're using it in in the agri-food supply chain. There's a case for broadening that out to post-consumer food waste and potentially even things like sewage, manure. Maybe in those cases, then you might not be using them straight into the agri-food supply chain, but you could also be using them for things like black soldier fly for biofuels. And that has been shown that the fatty acid profiles are conducive to being used as biofuel. In terms of some sector challenges, we've got things such as it's 2 animals in one, mealworms and black soldier fly, both of an adult stage, which is very different from the larval stage. And that means the farming becomes different. So increasingly we see this decoupling of the supply chain, where we see companies actually looking at shipping out baby insects to farmers who grow them out, and them just focusing on a hatchery operation. It's also worth noting this is it's a bio-innovation, not a pure technological in terms of digital technologies or anything like that. And as a result, how do we incentivize this to bring it online further? Because the same incentives which apply for your technology rollout in terms of digital might not apply for what are more typical agri-food physical technologies. It's a young industry, so there's a lot of dynamicism and things change quickly. And as a result, sometimes the industry is still a bit closed. Increasingly, we're seeing that open up. And as always the case, if you are interested, do reach out and engage in the sector. But there's also that case of breaking new ground, a lot of expertise and collaboration required to bring in and really accelerate the development of the sector. And I think that's really done through finding the right people and timing as well, in terms of bringing the right people in at the right time. And I'll emphasize those 2 points again. If you're interested in joining the industry, regardless of skill set, now is the time, because it's still developing and you can build up specialism as you go along. And I'll highlight a bit of that through who we have in our team, but it is definitely a case of get stuck in, reach out and see what's missing in our industry and develop solutions, because there is still space as it develops further. So I'm going to give you a quick run through as well on what we do as an insect genetics company at BetaBugs. So as a genetics company, we're all about making better insects, and increasingly we're a developer and distributor of black soldier fly breeds for the animal feed sector, based in the UK in Edinburgh. So really, when you look at genetics, why genetics? It's all about it creates impact, and it creates profitable, scalable impact. Chickens nowadays grow bigger, faster, and use less feed, and that's impacted the way our supply chains have developed over time. It's the same case with black soldier fly. We will make breeds which grow faster, bigger, and are more efficient. As a result, again, creating a scalable, profitable impact, which will affect the feed, food, and further sectors as an industry. But black soldier fly, as I alluded to before, has a number of places it can go as it develops further. So the reason we're doing genetics is because insect protein does have a challenge with price point competition currently. The price needs to be on par with fish meal and soy meal for it to be taken up by the agri-food industry at scale. And increasingly, what we'll see is that as volumes improve, the price will come down, but you can also improve the efficiency of production through genetics. And when you look at the field, it produces more than it did before. And same with these facilities. By doubling genetic productivity, you don't need to build a second facility. So at BetaBugs, we're in the business of developing and distributing black soldier fly breeds in the form of eggs to customers. And really, the breeding program is done through a combination of quantitative genetics, high throughput trait measurement, which allows us to pick out the best traits, best performers on particular traits, and zoo technologies, which are focused specifically on breeding. And again, this alludes to what I mentioned before. Specialization means you can address different challenges and take them on and develop unique solutions to them, because you're not focused on scaling up to large production. We'll leave that to the producers. We'll focus on creating elite genetics. And we're doing this in combination. We're based in Edinburgh. We're up at the Easterbush campus, and we're doing this with involvement from the Roslin Institute, a world leader in animal genetics. So they're the guys behind Dolly the sheep, but increasingly they do a lot of animal breeding. And we've worked with them through, so this is a bit of the innovation play as well in our industry, is bringing along new players who diversify into the operation. And we've had a great relationship with Roslin Institute covering breeding program development through One Innovate UK project, along with a KTP, which is just going online. So as I mentioned, it's all about developing this high performance genetics at the top of a nucleus, which you then distribute down to producers, usually by multiplying it up, and that's down to the biology of the animal as well. And this is the same in any industry, but with chicken, pig, fish, plants, you need to multiply out the elite genetics to bring it down to production to create that impact. And the way we do that at BetaBugs is we have a nucleus, which is the breeding program, that improves the genetics, and then we have a multiplier, which scales up the genetics, and then the genetics gets distributed out to black soldier fly producers. And again, this links up to that decoupling. So if producers want to do a completely decoupled cycle, they can receive eggs very regularly. If they want to do a bit of it in-house, they can keep receiving eggs on a regular basis, so they can keep abreast of the genetic improvements. And I wouldn't be able to sit down and talk to you about this without a great team working at Beetabugs as well. And as I mentioned before, it's a case of getting stuck in the industry. We've got expertise in animal science, insect science here, R&D in terms of coming from different backgrounds, but then building up the expertise. It's really, if you've got an interest and an inquisitive mindset, you'll be able to go far in our sector, and then spotting the gaps, bringing in the right people, building the right connections. And what we see increasingly is, as a sector, is as people develop here in the sector, then they will go and build further things out in the sector. So it's really interesting. It's a great time to be involved, and there's a lot of scope for career progression. And as a nutshell, as a wrap, I think that's everything. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have any thoughts, feel free to get in touch. We do work across the whole value chain, so that's another key point to keep in mind. And increasingly, for the UK supply chain to come online, we need to see more producers of magnitude come online as an industry, because there's a lot of people and a lot of animals to feed in the UK alone. Brilliant. Any questions, get in touch. Thank you. I can also answer questions just now. Cheers.